Who makes the New York Giants' initial 53-man roster? My predictions coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credentialed member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you happen to be making us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. All right, Giant fans, I debated when to do this show. And this show is going to be about my predictions for the 53-man roster. Now, I debated whether to do it before the preseason finale or after. So what I am going to do is I'm going to do it today before the preseason finale. If anything changes, I will incorporate that in my wrap-up of the preseason finale against the New England Patriots. So that's the plan for today, as well as for the rest of the week. So we'll look at the 53-man roster. We'll look at some potential practice squatters and some surprises. Now, I created a spreadsheet, which I have right here, to make sure that my numbers were correct. So my numbers did come to 53, so that should work beautifully. So let's get into it. All right, let's start off with the offensive backfield. Now, at quarterback, I think it's pretty obvious. Okay, it's going to be Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart. Now, a word about Jameis Winston. I know that there have been reports about teams being interested in trading for him, but on Tuesday, Brandon Brown spoke to the media and came right out and said that they have no interest in trading Jameis Winston, which does not surprise me. I mean, if they were going to trade him, it might make sense to wait until later in the year as we get a little closer to the trade deadline. But it doesn't sound like they want to trade him. All right. So, you never say never, I suppose. But right now, I would say Jameis Winston is on this roster. So that means Tommy DeVito does not make the cut. Now, do the Giants try and slip DeVito through to the practice squad? I think that if he clears waivers, that's what they would like to do. Will he clear waivers? That I'm not so sure. There are some quarterback needy teams out there, and I could see some of them, or at least one of them, taking a flyer on DeVito. All right, you can look at Tennessee. You can maybe look out at Los Angeles, especially if they still have some questions about Matthew Stafford's back. You might even look at, who knows, Detroit could be a possibility. The Saints could be a possibility. So there are some teams out there that might put in a claim for Tommy DeVito should he hit the waiver wire, which I do expect him to do. So we'll see if that happens. But I do think if he clears waivers, the Giants will try and sign him to the practice squad. All right, let's go to running backs. I have 4. Initially, I was going to do 3, but for those who haven't heard, Cam Skattebo returned to practice on Tuesday. Now, initially, I thought, okay, if Skattebo missed practice this week, he's probably going to start the season on Iyer on the with the designated to return designation. Skattebo is coming along. Now, I do not think he's going to play in the preseason finale, since, he's just coming back off of that hamstring injury and you don't want to have a setback. But I do think they keep him on the roster. So my 4 running backs, Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary, Dante Miller, and Skattebo. I do think Dante Miller is going to make this roster. So, I was going to go with just 4. I was just going to go with 3. I went with 4 at the running back position. And I think Dante Miller deserves to make it, to be honest with you. I think Jonathan Ward is going to be the odd man out in this in this final picture here. All right, let's take a look at tight ends. All right, tight ends. Now, this was difficult for me because I'm like, Should I keep 3 or should I keep 4? I ended up keeping 4. All right. I stole a spot from another position group, which I'll get to a little later on in the show. But my 4 are Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, Thomas Fidone II, and Greg Dulcich. So that means Chris Manhertz is out. All right. Now, if you had asked me a month ago what I would have done here, I would have said 3, and I would have had Manhertz making the team. Manhertz, I know they like him, but Dulcich has had a pretty good summer, and he can block and he can catch. He can do basically all the things that Manhertz can do, plus he's younger and a little less expensive. So I think Dulcich has a chance of getting a spot. Now, Fidone's interesting because if I had gone with 3, my question would have been, should I have kept him or done what with him? Now, I don't think that Fidone will last if he gets waived. So I think you have to keep him unless, heaven forbid he gets injured in the preseason finale, and then maybe you can make a case for IR for him. But I went with 4. Now, the thing to watch, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, Daniel Bellinger has over $3 million base salary. He's going to have to take a pay cut. Does he take it or does he refuse? If he refuses, maybe the Giants say, you know what? We can't carry you. We're going to cut you. If that happens, then I think potentially they maybe keep Manhertz. And I say that reluctantly because in that case, maybe they go with 3 instead of 4. So I have no idea if, the Giants are going to go to Bellinger for a pay cut. I think they should, to be honest with you, because that's a lot to be making for a TE2. Do Giants maybe look to try and trade Bellinger? It's a possibility. Who knows? But right now, today, Tuesday night, as I record this, I'm going with 4. Johnson, Bellinger, Fidone, and Dulcich. Okay, now let's take a look at the receivers. Now, this one was tough. I initially was going to go with 7 here. I ended up going with 6, and I cross-checked to make sure that I had guys that could play special teams. So the first 3, obviously, I've got Neighbors, Slayton, and Robinson. They're locks. I have Hyatt making this team, even though Hyatt hasn't really done much this summer in the preseason games. I do think they're going to hang on to him. They traded up for him. I can't see them giving up on him, even after, the last couple of years. So I do think he makes it. The other 2, I have Bo Collins making this roster for special teams and also because, he's looked pretty good when given his opportunities. Now, I debated whether to go with Emir Smith-Marset or Gunnar Olszewski at the return spot. I ended up keeping Smith-Marset because I think Smith-Marset has been just a smidge better so far than Olszewski. That said, that's going to be one of the battles that's going to need to be settled on Thursday night. Now, Smith-Marset did not play against the Jets last week because he was banged up. Is he still good to go? Possibly. I don't know. But that's going to be a battle to watch if he is good to go. If he is not good to go, maybe he lands on IR and it becomes Olszewski. But for my purposes and based on what I know right now to be true, I have Smith-Marset making it over Olszewski. All right, coming up next, I'm going to go to the trenches. We'll take a look at offensive line and defensive line. And there's some tough decisions and some surprising decisions that I'm going to cover. That's right after this. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, I'm planning on playing Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Whether you're all in on something new or you like sticking to head-to-head leagues or jumping into public leagues, Yahoo has you covered. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football, Yahoo is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the perfect time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm Patricia Traina, and we are taking a very, very early guess here at the 53-man roster. The Giants still have a preseason game to sort out some of the bottom of the depth chart type of decisions. There's also a matter of who's banged up. Brian Daboll has been very secretive about injuries. And for those of you who ask me why he's been secretive, this is probably why, because it's going to factor into who he keeps and who he doesn't keep. And why give, the other 31 teams around the league a hint as to who might not make it, who might make it, and so forth. Okay, so in this segment, we're going to take a look at the trenches, the offensive line and the defensive line. This was difficult for me because there's still, I think, battles that need to be solved on both sides of the ball. So let's start with the offensive line. Now, for those who missed the announcement, Andrew Thomas is off PUP, which we kind of expected this would be roughly the time he would come off PUP. We don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1. So what I'm curious to see is if the Giants will keep 9 offensive linemen or will they go with 10 just to have an extra guy. What I think they're going to do, I think they're going to go with 9 and they're going to carry somebody on the practice squad. But they might not need to because if the 9 that I have picked out for the initial 53 comes to fruition, they should be good to go. All right. So my 9 are as follows: Andrew Thomas, John Runyon Jr., John Michael Schmitz, Greg Van Roten, Jermaine Illuminor. For backups, I've got Marcus Bowe, James Hudson III, Evan Neal, and Aaron Stinney. So missing from this group is Jake Kubas, a guy who at the start of camp, I would have said probably makes the roster. I think they try and maybe push Kubas to the practice squad. I think maybe they push Brian Hudson, the young center, to the practice squad. So I can see the Giants keeping maybe 1 or 2 interior linemen and maybe 1 tackle to develop on the practice squad. So this way, if Andrew Thomas isn't ready to go and they need to bring up another offensive lineman, they can do so. So those are my 9 there. And, Evan Neal is really going to be key here. Evan Neal is coming along at guard. It's not perfect. He's not a finished product, but I do think he's going to, make the roster at guard. Now, is he going to push Greg Van Roten for a starting spot? Probably not. Probably not right away at any rate. So, Neal, remember, he just basically started this year learning the position and he hasn't really, mastered it. So, we'll have to see how he does in this preseason finale. The arrow's pointing up for Evan Neal, but, he's not ready to challenge for a starting job just yet. Okay, let's go to the defensive line. Now, for the defensive line, I ended up keeping 6. And there were some really difficult decisions here. And one of which I think is going to surprise you. Okay, now, FYI, I consider Chauncey Golston defensive line. I know some depth charts have him listed as outside linebacker. I have him on the defensive line, right? Because I think he primarily plays with his hand in the dirt. So that's why I have him in the defensive line group. So my 6 guys, Dexter Lawrence, Roy Robertson Harris, Elijah Chapman, Golston, Darius Alexander, and drumroll please, Rakeem Nunez-Roches. Yeah, you heard right. Rakeem Nunez-Roches. Now you're probably sitting there saying, why? Why Rakeem Nunez-Roches? And I debated this one. I went back and forth. Should I put Nacho on here? Should I go with DJ Davidson, who probably would have been my 7th? Why go with Nacho? Especially since he has a high cap hit. He's not exactly a guy who makes a whole lot of plays in terms of being able to get off blocks. He doesn't exactly take up space, take up multiple blockers. Why keep Nacho? I think Nacho's one of those guys that they're going to keep because he's not a horrible player, but he's also a very good locker room presence. And the coaches kind of like him. And he does a lot of things right in their eyes. So I can see a case where they keep Nacho. Now, he's another guy who, as I said on yesterday's show, that his salary cap is just, it's too high. So it's not like they can restructure him, all right, because he is in the final year of his contract. If anything, they would have to maybe see about getting him to take a pay cut. Now, would he take a pay cut? I don't know the answer to that. If he says no, then he's out and DJ Davidson is in. So, yeah, I'm kind of surprised, if I'm being honest with you. I initially, matter of fact, every 53-man roster projection I've done this offseason, I've had Nacho off of it. And just, I have a feeling he makes it. Don't ask me why, just vibes that I've been picking up, things I've kind of been learning, about it. So, yeah, I think he makes it. Now, for the practice squad, assuming that this 6 is what works out, DJ Davidson is a candidate for the practice squad, I think. I don't think, let me see. Jeremiah Ledbetter, I don't think they're going to put for the practice squad. They may go with Jordan Riley, but I doubt it because, Davidson's kind of been a little bit better than Jordan Riley. And I don't think Corey Durden makes it either. So really, I think Davidson has the best chance of landing on the practice squad out of all the guys who don't make the initial 53. But yeah, that Nacho pick, I guess this is kind of a surprise, right? I guess a lot of you are like, no, there's no way they're going to keep Nacho, but just a gut feeling. So we'll see if Nacho ends up making it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Remember, this is an initial 53. And that reminds me, folks, it's an initial 53, not the final 53. Once the 53-man roster is announced, there will be further cuts made as guys are claimed off of waivers. And the Giants, of course, have the 3rd spot in the waiver priority order, which for the first 3 weeks of the season is the same order as the 2025 draft. So the Giants do have an opportunity to add 2 different positions if they're not happy with the depth they initially set. So just keep that in mind. And certainly, we'll take a look at that. We'll see who gets cut and who might make sense for the Giants. And we'll update you on roster moves and surprises and all that good stuff on future shows. All right, Giant fans, coming up next, we're going to do, actually, before we take a break, let's just get the obvious out of the way. The 3 specialists, Gano, Gillen, and Kreider. They're going to make it. Okay. That being said, coming up next, we're going to look at the linebackers, the safeties, and the cornerbacks. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, we've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app shows you a panoramic seat view so that there are no surprises. With Game Time, the price you see is the price you pay. There are no hidden fees. Worried about what happens if your plans change? The Game Time guarantee has your back with a cancellation protection and more. So go on and take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are predicting the initial 53-man Giants roster. Again, initial is the key word. And we are now up to the back end of the defense, the inside linebackers, outside linebackers, safeties, and cornerbacks. Okay, so all these names that I've been giving you, this does add up to 53. Again, I did it on a spreadsheet to make sure of it. So, all right, let's start with the inside linebacker group. I went with 4 on this group. All right, my 4 are Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Darius Muaso, and Chris Board. All right, Board makes the roster because of special teams. Not so much, I mean, he can give you snaps at inside linebacker, but he's more of a special teams guy. So I went with him over, like a Deontay Johnson because, Deontay Johnson, he's intriguing. And I like him, what he brings to the table, but I think he probably needs a little bit more, in the lines of development and seasoning. So I could see him not making the roster. Maybe he makes, the practice squad. So those are my 4, Okereke, McFadden, Muaso, and Board. And by the way, spoiler alert, early need for the Giants next year is going to be inside linebacker because Okereke is going to have the final year of his deal and a very big cap hit. McFadden is going to be an unrestricted free agent, and they're going to need to replenish that area. So I definitely see, like I said, a Deontay Johnson maybe landing on the practice squad so that they can develop him. All right, let's go to outside linebackers. Now, again, I had Chauncey Golston in with the defensive linemen, so I don't count him with the outside linebackers. I have 4 for this group as well. I've got Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and, surprise, Trace Ford over Tamon Fox. I just feel like there's a little bit more to work with Trace Ford as opposed to Tamon Fox. Fox, maybe he goes to the practice squad. Maybe they move on from him. But Ford has quietly been one of those guys that has had a pretty decent summer. So I think, like I said, the Giants go with 4. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of a light amount because that gives you a total of 8 linebackers. But again, you've got Golston, who's part of the pass rush group. You've got Dexter Lawrence, who's part of the pass rush group. So you got enough guys. And plus, Shane Bowen has been running some exotic-looking blitzes on the pass rush where he's had a corner come in or a safety come in. So the Giants have pass rushers. All right. They have different packages that they've used. And I think they're going to be okay there. I know, again, it's light with 4, but you put 1 on the practice squad. And for the practice squad, let me just take a look at the depth chart here. If you're going to put somebody on the practice squad, you could make a case for Tamon Fox if you want to keep him, but I just wonder if they're going to move on from him. Possibility, but we'll have to see, obviously. All right, let's take a look at the safeties. I've got 4 for the safeties as well. Javon Holland, Tyler Nubin, Dane Belton, and I'm going to go with Kevon Wallace over Makari Page. Now, Makari Page was a guy that I really hoped would show something, show enough to make the roster. I don't think he has done that. Wallace is a veteran, and that safety group is still kind of relatively young if you take Wallace out of it. So I think Makari Page maybe is a practice squad candidate as opposed to a 53-man roster guy. So 4 safeties. Cornerbacks, I went with 6. Might be a little heavy here, but I went with 6 because of versatility and special teams. So my 6 at cornerbacks are Paulson Adebo, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott, Art Green, Drew Phillips, and I kept Nick Jones. Now, Green and Jones can contribute on special teams, as can Banks, who has done it in the past, as can Flott, who has done it in the past. So I went with 6 here. I think that's probably going to be a bit much. Maybe, they take one of those spots and they devote it to, I don't know, one of the linebacker spots that I'm overlooking here, but I just went with 6. And as far as who's going to get the starting job at CB2, I think it's going to be Banks. I think he's going to edge Flott out because, having gone back, looked at the stats, looked at the film, Flott has been, he's been okay, but Banks has been a little bit better than I think I initially gave him credit for. So I do think he wins the starting job. Now, let's take a look at the potential practice squatters, all right, guys that didn't make the team according to this projection. O'Donnell Fortune, Trey Hawkins III, TJ Moore. Those are 3 guys potentially for practice squad. I think at this point, maybe Hawkins and Moore might be practice squad candidates for the Giants, right? This is another one of those battles where they've got to sort it out, I think, at the at the final preseason game. So there's a lot of, bottom of the roster type of decisions that Brian Daboll is going to make. And, speaking of that, just real quick, I know some of you are like, hey, what's the story? Are the starters going to play? I don't think they're going to play in the preseason finale. Brian Daboll basically said what I just told you, that there are still some guys they want to take a look at, some decisions they need to make, guys that are on the bubble that they have to decide, okay, do we keep them or do we go in a different direction? So I do think you're going to see a lot more of the reserves as opposed to the starters. Now, what I would like to see maybe Jackson Dart get the start in this game and maybe see him get a few snaps with the first string offensive line. Now, will that happen? Probably not. I would like to see it, though, because, Daboll, who prepares for everything and anything, if Jackson Dart at some point is going to be taking up mop-up roles and whatnot, or playing down the line, maybe he leapfrogs over Jameis Winston, get him out there and let him work a little bit with the first team offensive line. So all that will be sorted out Thursday night. But before then, we'll have one more show for you. And then, of course, after the game on Thursday night, we'll wrap things up with any adjustments, any roster projection updates. And then we will take you into the weekend. And next week, the Giants go into regular season prep mode once they cut down the roster, which the roster cuts will be on Tuesday the 26th. And, of course, we'll have reactions and surprises and all good stuff for you here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So that said, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. Want to thank you, as always, for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. Now, for your next listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. NFL fantasy draft season is here, so Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinnie, Iyer, and Michelle Magdziuk have you covered. Listen every day to prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so that you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for me. I will see you again tomorrow.